So we are back with today's broadcast, and as you can see, I'm joined by yet another very special guest. Let's learn a little bit more. So over to you. Please introduce yourself, and can you tell us about your role as a hire apprentice at Heidelberg Materials UK and what that typical day looks like for you?
Yeah, so my name is Natasha. I'm a first year hire apprentice and I'm currently doing quantity surveying and estimating with the company. It sounds a bit kind of complicated, but pretty much what it is they're both massive parts of the work that we do in every day, which is laying roads. And the estimating side of it is winning the job. So before we get onto laying the road, we have to win it. So that's the estimating side. And then the labouring side is the middle part, so doing the job. And then the quantity surveying side is then getting paid for the job. So I do the start and the end process. And for me, a typical day will look like coming into the office, getting myself sorted for the day, looking at anything I have to do, and then going out on site, seeing some of the production and things like that, what we do in our everyday. And then also, sometimes I go to the quarry and see all the products being made, which is really quite cool. It's not what I expected it to be, but it's really fun.
I mean, how incredible. And I think, when people talk about apprenticeships, we don't really know what they get up to on a day to day basis,
Yeah,
because let's face it, the title of the apprenticeship, although, yes, it sounds exciting and maybe sometimes a little bit confusing, you actually love to, and, delve deeper into what it is that the apprentices do. So that's really exciting that you get to go out on site, also in
yeah.
the office. So a bit of that hybrid as well of coming into the office and then going out on site, which is exciting. So, what inspired you to pursue this apprenticeship then instead of going to university after your A levels?
So if I'm being completely honest, I had my heart set on uni from such a young age. Finished my GCSEs, thought uni. I chose my A levels, and to be honest, if I could choose them again, I wouldn't choose the ones I did. I think in that way, because I chose the A levels I thought would look good on an application to uni, which is one of my biggest pieces of advice, probably not to do that. And then a little bit more through my A levels, I realised that uni probably wasn't going to be for me. I wanted to learn something more hands-on, and when school put on careers events and things like that, I realised that apprenticeships, you can gain so much more from doing an apprenticeship, maybe rather than uni. I know with uni you get your qualification, but the ultimate thing is with an apprenticeship you can gain all that. Yes, it might take a little bit longer, but you gain all that and more. So I think that's the biggest thing for me, and not having the debt and bits and pieces like that.
Absolutely. And there's so many positives, isn't there, to an apprenticeship,
Yeah,
maybe versus that university route. And obviously what we don't want to do is take away from the fact that university for some people is their destined route and that's something
yeah,
that they want to do. But also it's about exploring apprenticeships as well, because there's so many different apprenticeships that are around that might be suited to what it is that you want to do. And thank you for that advice as well. I think that's going to be really helpful for young people that are just in that process of thinking about what the next steps are when it comes to A levels or further education and higher education. Now, something that we hear a lot about in school is about work experience. So I'm interested to find out what experience you got before starting your apprenticeship and how you found those opportunities.
so for me, I was very lucky from a young age. My parents own their own business, so from being very young, I on a Saturday morning would go in there, and it was all about kind of talking to customers and things like that. They own a hairdressing salon, so I'd go and sweep up, make cups of tea and coffee, all the little things. But it was gaining that confidence to speak to older people, which is like a massive thing. I think, especially like with COVID and things, that could have really affected people. But I'm glad I did that. I also got a job as a waitress at my local pub, and that was great. It was a really, really nice environment, and not only that, it gave me resilience and things like that because not every day can be good. I also then before getting my apprenticeship, once I was able to drive, I got a job at Centre Parks as a lifeguard, and that was great. I absolutely loved that. I loved the responsibility I had to take on with that. Um, but all different things that I've done have ultimately led me to be able to get the apprenticeship and have them skills and things to put on my CV, which is obviously really important. And yeah, it just rounds it all up in the end. One last thing that I did, which I know schools do push for, is I did my week's work experience, and I went to a law firm for that. And with that, that was what I thought I was going to do. It's what I thought I was destined to do for as long as I can remember. I did my week's work experience, and I loved it. It was everything I hoped it'd be. It's interesting, loads of different things. But ultimately, afterwards, I just realised it wasn't for me, which is okay. But yeah, I think everything else that I'd done as well just really helped with getting the apprenticeship.
And I suppose that's what it's about, isn't it? Thinking about what it is that you do, and be it, part-time work, whether it's volunteering, whether it's things like football teams at schools or sports teams, whatever that looks like, or extracurriculars, is about thinking, what skills am I gaining from this experience that I'm having,
Definitely.
and is that going to be able to help me in the future? So it's really interesting that, although you mention, for example, being a lifeguard, although yes, not really something that you're currently doing at the moment, and maybe not using those specific technical skills, so to speak, to be a lifeguard, but those softer skills that you've learned from that have actually helped you within your career now. And I think that's really, it's such a great thing for young people to actually understand, is that, take every opportunity that you've got and really start thinking about those softer skills and what that's going to do. Now, earlier you gave us some great advice about, I suppose, picking those A levels and making those decisions, and what ultimately it led for you. What advice would you give to 11 to 16-year-olds, for example, who are unsure about whether to choose apprenticeship or university, having gone through what you've gone through?
I think for me, the biggest thing is don't put too much pressure on yourself. Everything has a way of working out. I feel like personally for myself, I went through a bit of a time and a phase where I just thought, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do in life. I feel like I've nothing really shouted out to me and things like that. But the biggest thing is just don't put too much pressure on yourself. Pick the subjects that you want if you're going on to A level or if you go into college, whatever it might be. Pick something you enjoy because that's ultimately going to make you happy. If you pick something that you're not going to enjoy, that you think, like I did, looks good on a university application, you're not going to stick at it. You're not going to enjoy it. Little bits and pieces like that will all factor into then how you think in the future. I think another thing would be don't be peer pressured. There's a massive thing around university and things like that, but ultimately you can gain exactly the same qualifications by doing an apprenticeship as you can university, vice versa. Um, and another thing, which I found myself I struggled with because I'm quite independent, is don't be afraid to ask for help. At the end of the day, everybody has been in certain situations where they don't know what they want to do with their life, or they feel like they're going through a little bit of things that might be a bump in the road. So just let things pan out, but work hard.
That is some great advice. Thank you so much for that. And I think not only young people, but everybody can take that advice on board. And really, that's really great advice. It actually is. So thank you for that. One thing that I know sometimes we see is that parents and teachers, especially, will be asking about apprenticeships and how they can support their young people, so their students, or their children, or the children that they look after, about exploring opportunities like yours. So how can parents and teachers support them?
So for me, I think just be on board with their ideas. especially from parents' point of views. Your children might not necessarily want to do something that you could imagine them doing. So just be on board. They've got enough pressure on themselves as it is with school and exams and all them kind of things, but be on board with them. Try and push them out there. Let them think outside the box. There's so many apprenticeships and opportunities that I didn't know were available, and I probably still don't know are available. So get that research done. Take your children or anybody who it is that you might be looking after. Take them to careers fairs to see people. A massive thing also is get advice off family or other people in their lives that could make a difference to them. I think for teachers as well, they should 100% put talks on, because that for me is what made me choose an apprenticeship, is hearing from other people and hearing their experiences with apprenticeships, and it made me choose my apprenticeship. So I think that's a big thing.
Absolutely. And you are right. I think, the overarching thing of what you're saying there is that parents, teachers, whoever it is that's in these young people's lives, and as we know, apprenticeships are for everybody, but today we're focusing on younger people. And I suppose what it is about is supporting them in whatever decision that they choose to make. And, really getting, like you say, getting on board with their ideas about what they want to do, exploring different careers as well. I think that's extremely important as well, because we know that there's so many options out there. Okay,
Yeah.
let's finish off today and find out. This has got to be one of my favourite bits of the interview, to be honest, because it's all about misconceptions and those stereotypes that may be what we find with apprenticeships. So, what of those stereotypes or those misconceptions would you like to clear up for parents and teachers, but also the young people watching today?
It is a really good question, that one, because it made me have a proper think about it. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that apprenticeships are only for certain type of people. So one misconception that I experienced myself before looking out onto apprenticeships was that they're for the beauty industry or the trade or things like that. But the reality of it is there's so many companies now who offer them, because it's like they can mould the apprentices into what they look for in the future when it comes to the company or business. So it's like you can now get apprenticeships with the police, with Amazon, who you get your parcels off. You can get apprenticeships with any and every kind of industry you can think of. So that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions. But I think another one is that people automatically think people who are on apprenticeships weren't good enough to go to university or weren't good enough to do the A levels, which is a huge, huge no-go. I think that is probably one that makes me a little bit annoyed, because I just think that you can gain the same qualifications by doing an apprenticeship. All these different things, it requires different skills that might not be set for university or your A levels or whatever it might be, but it doesn't necessarily come down to how brainy you are or how quick you can do your times tables, nothing like that. And lastly, for this one, I think I've touched on it before, but a big misconception is that with your apprenticeship, you don't gain a higher qualification, which is quite wrong, because obviously these days now you can do degree apprenticeships, you can do all these different things. That's what I'm hoping to go on to after my higher apprentice, after being a higher apprentice, sorry. So yeah, just research them and you'll see that apprenticeships might not be what you think they are.
Couldn't agree more with those points. Natasha, I want to take this opportunity to say a huge thank you for taking the time out to speak with me today and really open our eyes a little bit more into what it is that you do. And I think it's really important that we have these talks and these conversations to highlight how incredible apprenticeships actually are and what they can offer to young people and to everybody, as I mentioned before, but specifically today to young people about what is your next step. Let's think about, is there an apprenticeship, and is the apprenticeship right for me? So a huge thank you once again, Natasha, for coming on and speaking with me.
Thank you for having me.